just like living in a white terror that no one will know what's going to happen tomorrow in Hong Kong.
Over 100,000 people have left Hong Kong in the past 2 years. Many fear a 50-year promise to preserve Hong Kong's semi-autonomy from China is being cut in half as the Chinese Communist Party's reach over Hong Kong increases by the day.
We have done a lot, but no change has ever happened. Instead, things have been getting worse.
The government just didn't hear us. Or like even though they hear us, they just ignore us.
Now Hong Kong residents are either fleeing for their safety or looking for the promise of a better future elsewhere. Why is this happening? To understand that, we have to rewind the clock and take a closer look at how the small territory of Hong Kong that grew into an international financial hub is now being dragged further and further into the control of the Chinese mainland. The story starts in the mid-1800s. Hong Kong was a small island on the eastern Pearl River Delta off the south coast of China. In Britain's victory in 2 Opium Wars, China ceded control of Hong Kong, establishing it as a British colony for a period of 99 years. In that time, the city became one of the freest economies in the world, with a robust legal system and a vibrant media. On July 1, 1997, the British formally handed over Hong Kong back to China, but under a special agreement. They called it One Country, Two Systems. China promised that Hong Kong would keep its rights and freedoms by establishing a system where the territory could be semi-autonomous from China, allowing for liberties like rule of law, freedom of the press, and freedom of speech, something that Communist China does not allow on the Chinese mainland. But this wasn't supposed to last forever. The agreement stated that the One Country, Two Systems promise would be in place for at least 50 years. Now, 2022 marks the 25th anniversary of the handover. And even only at the halfway point, Hong Kong has completely changed.
It would not be tolerated for Hong Kong to be a place where people could publish books and post things on the internet, highly critical of the Communist Party.
Though not a true democracy, Hong Kong residents exercised the power of peaceful protest to voice their dissatisfaction to the government. Like in 1989, when Hong Kongers came out in collective grief after the Tiananmen Square massacre. In 2003, 500,000 people successfully protested a government bill that would infringe on their rights and freedoms. And in 2014, the so-called Umbrella Movement, where protesters peacefully occupied parts of the city for 79 days after Beijing reneged on a promise of granting universal suffrage. It all came to a head in 2019 when a proposed extradition bill sparked mass outcry, which saw 2 million people protesting on the streets.
It was a spontaneous, public, very widespread, popular reaction to the proposal of the Hong Kong government to implement a law that would make it possible for the first time to extradite people accused of crimes, to extradite them from the Hong Kong justice system to the mainland justice system.
The scale of these 2019 demonstrations were unlike anything that had come before. Those who participated now fear persecution, even after fleeing Hong Kong. To protect their identities, we are not using their real names.
First of all, it's super hot, it's so warm because it's in the very deep summer. And then everyone was sweating, it was super noisy, everyone was chanting slogans.
You had violent clashes between the police and protesters.
Tear gas and rubber bullets were flying around, and there were also water cannons. Initially, I thought the government would listen to peaceful protesters and scrap the extradition bill, but it turned out that it didn't listen at all.
You would think that any responsive government would need to respond to the sentiment of the people, and they would have to adjust their policies accordingly.
Over a year after the protests came a major tipping point.
The promulgation of the National Security Law in the summer of 2020 was in many ways a game changer.
Any case under the National Security Law could be transferred to mainland jurisdiction, meaning the person charged or the people charged could be then transferred to the mainland, tried in the mainland justice system under mainland law.
Under the law, anyone anywhere in the world can be charged with endangering China's national security if they are deemed to have colluded with foreign forces, committed secession, sedition, or terrorism against the Chinese government.
It became effective within minutes of having been promulgated. The next day, already 10 people were arrested under the national security law. That was really unprecedented.
Things in Hong Kong changed overnight.
It has become much more difficult for people in Hong Kong to gather together to protest. And we know that now many of the news outlets have either voluntarily shut themselves down or they have been forced to shut down.
It's had a huge impact. You saw people withdrawing from politics, including some longtime democracy activists, and many of them are now in prison.
I left Hong Kong a few days before the implementation of the national security law. We knew that it would criminalize free speech and target democratic campaigners like me. It's just like falling off from a cliff that reminds everyone how fragile freedoms are and how important for us to safeguard them.
The deterioration of democratic rights and freedoms have led to a growing number of people packing up their lives and leaving Hong Kong. Many have gone to the UK or to Australia and Canada. So far, nearly 6,000 people have arrived in Canada from Hong Kong since 2019, a significant rise compared to previous years.
If you asked me why they decided to come here, I would say it's to provide a better education for the next generation. Kids in school, the teaching is becoming very different. They're no longer teaching in Cantonese. For kids, whatever language my friends speak, I'll speak. But for parents, there's another meaning behind it, and that really worries them.
I think we all want to stay in a Hong Kong which it has its own freedom, autonomy, and democracy. But the reality is, if we wanted to speak what we're thinking, if we wanted to give our next generation a better education, then many of them think that it is the only way to leave Hong Kong to achieve those aims.
And for those who have made new lives abroad, it is hard for them to watch the situation in Hong Kong worsen by the day.
You need to accept that you have to start everything from scratch. Your work, your life plans, your friends.
It is very heartbreaking. Every time I read the news of Hong Kong is what's happening now.
I feel hopeless and guilty, and I feel like I have abandoned my comrades in Hong Kong. I feel that I should speak out more often here because I have the freedom here to express my opinions.
And with career policeman John Lee coming in as the next chief executive of Hong Kong, there are fears the city will be further repressed under authoritarian rule.
What made Hong Kong special was that it was a place where different voices could be heard. It is very difficult for me to be optimistic. But maybe in the long run, when a pendulum swings to a certain extreme, there might be a chance for it to swing back to the middle.